I was broke, desperate, and terrified. To save my dying brother, I agreed to cook for the city's most dangerous billionaire, Damien Vargr. Rumors said he was a monster who ate his competitors alive. I thought I just had to make beef stew. I was wrong. The moment I walked into his boardroom, the meeting stopped dead. Damien didn't look at the food. He flared his nostrils and inhaled me. His eyes turned a glowing, unnatural gold, and he blocked the exit with his massive body. I thought I was going to be fired. Instead, he leaned in, sniffed my neck, and growled, "You are promoted." Now I'm trapped in his fortress, and I'm realizing the rumors were true. He is a monster, and he claims I belong to him. Welcome back to Linas Romantasy collection, and a huge welcome to all our new listeners. If you are ready for this romance, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. I love meeting our community, so drop a comment below telling me, where in the world are you listening from today? Now, get comfortable as we begin. Chapter 1. The Burnt Pot and the Thief. Swipper, drop it! Drop it right now, you little bandit! I scrambled across the scratched laminate floor of our tiny living room on my hands and knees. Ahead of me, Swipper, my rescue ferret who had more attitude than a teenager, chattered happily. He had my car keys clamped firmly in his jaws. He paused near the leg of the worn-out sofa, his long, slinky body wiggling. He looked me dead in the eye, his black button eyes twinkling with mischief. "Don't you dare," I warned, pointing a finger at him. "I have to leave in 20 minutes. If I lose those keys, I lose the gig. If I lose the gig, you're eating dry kibble for a month." Swipper chattered again, a sound that was definitely a laugh, and darted under the sofa. "I hate you," I groaned, dropping my forehead against the floorboards. "I actually, seriously loathe you right now." A rough, wet cough tore through the silence of the apartment. My frustration evaporated instantly. Ice replaced the blood in my veins. I abandoned the ferret hunt and shot up, rushing over to the oversized armchair in the corner. It was piled high with blankets, creating a small, soft nest. "Toby?" I whispered, kneeling beside the chair. "You okay, buddy?" My little brother, only 7 years old, peeked out from the mountain of wool. His face was pale, almost translucent in the dim afternoon light. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes, making them look too big for his face. He took a shaky breath and gave me a weak, lopsided smile. "I'm okay, Layla. Just a tickle. Did Swipper steal the keys again?" "He's holding them hostage," I said, smoothing the hair back from his sweaty forehead. He felt warm. Too warm. "I think he wants a ransom. Probably a sock." Toby giggled, but the sound turned into another coughing fit. His small body shook with the force of it. I rubbed his back, feeling the sharpness of his spine through his pajamas. He was getting thinner. Every day he felt a little lighter, a little more fragile. The drowning sensation washed over me. It was a familiar feeling now, the weight of being an orphan at 23, raising a sick child with a bank account that hovered near zero. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting into a knot. St. Jude's Hospital. Reminder, outstanding balance, $4,500. Status, urgent. Immediate payment required to continue treatment. The air left my lungs. $4,000. I had maybe $40 to my name. If they stopped his treatments... "Is it the bad doctor again?" Toby asked, his voice small and fearful. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and forced a bright, blinding smile onto my face. It was my best acting performance yet. "No," I lied. "Just a spam call about car insurance. Boring stuff." I grabbed his hands. "Hey, look at me. Tonight is the big one. Vargr Holdings. They pay triple the normal catering rate. I'm going to make the best beef bourguignon of my life. The CEO is going to love it, pay me a huge tip, and we'll be rich. Okay?" Toby nodded, his eyes trusting. "Okay, but come back soon." "I always come back," I promised. I kissed his forehead. "Guard the fort, and keep an eye on the rat." I grabbed the broom handle from the corner and poked it aggressively under the sofa. "Swipper, I swear, give me those keys or you're going in the soup." The keys slid out across the floorboards. I grabbed them, gathered my heavy catering crates, and ran out the door. My hands were shaking as I locked the apartment. It wasn't just the cold. I was terrified. Vargr Holdings was the biggest conglomerate in the city. The CEO, Damien Vargr, was a recluse. Rumors said he was a monster who fired people for breathing too loud. They said he was dangerous. But looking at the eviction notice taped to my neighbor's door, I knew I didn't have a choice. I would cook for the devil himself if it meant saving Toby. 1. Chapter 2. Feeding the Beast. The corporate headquarters of Vargr Holdings didn't look like an office building. It looked like a fortress built to keep the world out. The structure was a monolith of black glass and steel that pierced the sky. The air conditioning inside was set to Arctic, and the silence in the lobby was so heavy it felt like a physical weight. I stood in the executive boardroom, hidden behind my catering station. I stirred the massive pot of stew, the steam warming my face. The smell of slow-cooked beef, red wine, thyme, and rosemary filled the sterile room. It was my mother's recipe. It smelled like home and safety. It was completely out of place in this cold shark tank of a room. The board members started filing in. They were intimidating men in suits that cost more than my entire life's earnings. They moved silently, almost like predators stalking through tall grass, and they all did something weird. I watched as a man in a gray suit walked past my station. He didn't look at the food. He flared his nostrils. He inhaled deeply, his head tilting as he tracked the scent. It was unnerving. It was animalistic. "Attention!" A nervous assistant squeaked from the doorway, looking like he might faint. "Mr. Vargr is entering." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Damien Vargr walked in. I stopped stirring. He was massive. That was the only word for him. He stood well over 6'4", with shoulders that strained the fabric of his black suit jacket. His hair was as dark as a raven's wing, messy in a way that looked deliberate. But it was his eyes that froze me. They were a piercing, impossible shade of amber. He looked angry. No, not just angry. He looked furious, like a caged animal that had been poked with a stick for too long. He marched to the head of the table, ignoring the terrified board members. "Reports," he growled. His voice was deep, a baritone rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and straight into my chest. He didn't sit down. He paced, back and forth. His energy was chaotic, filling the room with static. Suddenly, he stopped mid-stride. He tilted his head. He inhaled. His head snapped toward me. I froze, the ladle dripping stew back into the pot with a soft plop. His amber eyes locked onto mine. A shockwave hit me, stronger than static electricity. It felt like I had touched a live wire. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Thump, thump, thump. He didn't look away. He turned his massive body and walked toward me. The other board members scrambled out of his way, pressing themselves against the walls. He stopped right in front of the catering table. He loomed over me, blocking out the overhead lights. He wasn't looking at the food anymore. He was looking at the pulse fluttering in my neck. He leaned in close, way too close. I could smell him. Rain, pine needles, and something muskier like expensive spice. "What is that?" he demanded. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. It's beef bourguignon, sir," I stammered, gripping the metal ladle like it was a weapon. "Slow-cooked for 12 hours, with rosemary." He stared at me for another long, agonizing second. His nostrils flared as he took another deep breath. Then he looked at the pot. He grabbed a clean spoon from the stack, dipped it in, and shoved a massive mouthful into his mouth. He froze. His eyes closed. A low, rumbling sound came from his chest. It sounded suspiciously like a purr, or maybe a growl of pure pleasure. The tension in his shoulders dropped an inch. He opened his eyes. The amber burned brighter, swirling with flecks of gold. "More," he commanded. Chapter 3. The Snake in a Suit. 10 minutes later, The high-stakes board meeting had turned into a one-man buffet. Damien Vargr had completely ignored his million-dollar projections. He had ignored his terrified staff. He had stood right there at my tiny catering table and eaten 3 bowls of stew. He didn't speak. He just watched me with those intense, unblinking eyes while I served him. It made my hands shake. I felt like a gazelle being watched by a lion who was deciding whether to play with his food or just eat it. Now, he was finally at the head of the table, listening to a presentation about stocks or mergers. But every 30 seconds, his gaze flicked back to me. I started packing up my equipment as quietly as possible. I just wanted to get out of there. I wanted to get back to Toby. "That smells divine," a smooth voice said right behind my ear. I jumped, nearly dropping a stack of bowls. I spun around. A man was leaning against the wall near my station. He was handsome in a slick, polished way. He had sandy blonde hair, a perfect tan, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a shark's smile. "Oh, thank you," I whispered, wiping my hands on my apron. "I'm Julian," he said, stepping into my personal space. "I'm a competitor of Mr. Vargr, though he wasn't exactly thrilled to see me at the merger talks." He looked me up and down. It wasn't the way Damien looked at me, intense and hungry. This felt calculating, oily. "You know, a talent like yours is wasted on catering," Julian purred. "You should be a private chef. I have a very large appetite." He reached out. His fingers, cold and smooth, tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I flinched. My skin crawled. Bam! The sound of a fist hitting mahogany exploded through the room like a gunshot. The entire boardroom jumped. I spun around. Damien Vargr was standing up. His heavy leather chair had been knocked backward by the force of his movement. His hands were planted on the table, and he was glaring at Julian with pure, unadulterated murder in his eyes. A low, menacing vibration filled the air. It was a growl. A literal growl. "Get your hands off her," Damien snarled. Julie pulled his hand back slowly, smirking. He didn't look scared. He looked amused. "Relax, Vargr," Julian drawled. "I was just complimenting the help. No need to get territorial." "She is not help," Damien growled. He moved. It happened so fast my brain couldn't process it. 1 second, he was at the head of the table. The next, he was standing between me and Julian. He was a wall of muscle and heat, shielding me from the other man. Damien radiated heat like a furnace. He turned his back on Julian, dismissing him as a threat, and looked down at me. The anger in his face vanished instantly. It was replaced by a dark, hungry obsession that was somehow even more terrifying. "Pack your things," Damien said. His voice dropped to a whisper that made my knees feel like water. I am?" I squeaked, clutching my ladle. "Am I fired?" "No," he said. He took a step closer. The tips of his polished shoes touched the tips of my scuffed sneakers. He invaded my world, consuming all the oxygen in the room. "You are promoted," he rumbled. "You're coming with me." Chapter 4. The Offer You Can't Refuse. I sat in the oversized leather chair across from Damien Vargr, trying to stop my hands from vibrating. The office was vast, dimly lit, and smelled of mahogany and power. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. It didn't sound like a clock. It sounded like a countdown. "You want me to... what?" I asked, my voice coming out as a squeak. Damien leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked under his shifting weight. He steepled his large fingers, watching me with those unnerving amber eyes. "I want you to be my personal chef," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Exclusively. You will live in my estate, you will cook 3 meals a day, and you will cater any private events I host." "Live in?" I blinked, processing the words. "Mr. Vargr, I have a life. I have an apartment. I have responsibilities. I can't just pack up and move into a billionaire's mansion because you liked 1 bowl of stew." "It wasn't just the stew," he muttered, almost to himself. He looked at me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve, or perhaps a snack he was saving for later. He slid a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper across the desk. "Look at the figure." I looked. My breath hitched. I actually stopped breathing for a solid 5 seconds. There were so many zeros. The monthly salary listed on that page was more than I had made in the last 2 years combined. "And," he continued, his voice dropping to a serious, heavy tone, "I am aware of your situation. Your brother, Tobias, St. Jude's Hospital." I went rigid. The paper slipped from my fingers. "How do you know that?" "I know everything," he said simply. It wasn't a boast, it was a fact. "If you sign this contract, I will pay off his current hospital bill immediately, tonight, and I will cover all his future treatments, the best specialists in the country. He will live, Layla." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. He wasn't just offering me a job, he was offering me a miracle. He was buying my brother's life. But there was a catch. In my experience, when rich men offered miracles, there was always a trap door waiting to open. "I can't leave him alone," I said, gripping the armrests until my knuckles turned white. "He's 7. He's sick. I am his only family." "Bring him," Damien said, waving a hand dismissively as if he were shooing away a fly. "The estate is large. He can have the East Wing. I don't care about children, as long as they are quiet and stay out of my way." My heart hammered against my ribs. He can come. It was too good to be true. "Okay," I breathed, the fight leaving my body. "But there's one more thing." Damien raised a dark eyebrow. "You are in no position to bargain, Layla, but go on, amuse me." I took a deep breath. This was the deal-breaker. "I have a pet," I said quickly. "He's my emotional support animal. He comes with us, or no deal." Damien narrowed his eyes. "A dog?" "I suppose a dog is acceptable, as long as it is well-trained." "Not exactly a dog," I mumbled, looking at the floor. "His name is Swipper. He's a ferret." Silence. I looked up. Damien's face was twisted in an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. It was the first time I'd seen him look anything other than angry or hungry. "A rodent?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "You want to bring a glorified rat into my home?" "He's not a rat. He's a ferret. And he's family." Damien looked at me. He took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled my scent again. I saw the conflict in his eyes. He hated the idea of the ferret, but he needed whatever it was he needed from me. "Fine," he growled, sounding like he physically regretted being born. "Bring the rat. But mark my words, Layla, if it bites me, I will turn it into a pair of winter gloves." Chapter 5. Signed in ink and spit. 2 days later, a sleek black SUV the size of a tank arrived at my crumbling apartment complex. The driver, a silent man with sunglasses, loaded Toby's small suitcase and my few battered boxes of clothes. I carried Swipper in his travel cage. He was scratching at the plastic bars, hissing like a deflating tire. He hated car rides. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered to Toby, squeezing his hand. He looked wide-eyed at the luxury leather seats. "We're going on an adventure, like in your books." The drive took an hour. We left the noisy, gray city behind, driving deep into the dense forest that bordered the mountains. The trees grew taller, thicker, blocking out the sun. We turned onto a private road, and suddenly, the forest cleared. The Vargr estate was a castle. That was the only word for it. It was a sprawling structure of dark stone and timber, ancient and imposing, surrounded by endless woods. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt wild. It felt like the kind of place where fairy tales happened, the grim kind, not the Disney kind. The car stopped. A man in a sharp gray suit was waiting on the stone steps. He wasn't Damien. "Ms. Layla?" the man said, bowing slightly. He held a clipboard. "I am Mr. Blackwood, the family attorney. Before you enter, there are formalities." He handed me a thick stack of papers. Standard non-disclosure agreement, Blackwood explained, clicking a pen. However, Mr. Vargr values his privacy above all else. What you see in this house, dietary habits, strange noises, late-night activities, stays in this house. If you speak to the press or anyone, the penalties are severe. I looked at the thick forest surrounding us. A crow cawed in the distance. I felt a chill slide down my spine. "I just cook the food, Mr. Blackwood," I said, signing my name on the dotted line. "I don't care about his secrets." The heavy oak front doors groaned open. Damien was standing in the foyer. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was dressed in dark jeans and a tight gray t-shirt that clung to his chest. His arms were thick with muscle, covered in a light dusting of dark hair. He looked less like a CEO and more like a lumberjack who chopped trees with his bare hands for fun. "You're late," he grunted, checking an invisible watch. "Traffic," I said, setting Swipper's cage down on the polished marble floor. "Okay, Swipper, be nice. New house." I unlatched the cage door to let him stretch his legs. It happened in slow motion. Swipper didn't stretch. He shot out of the cage like a furry, heat-seeking missile. He ignored me. He ignored Toby. He bolted straight across the gleaming tiles toward the biggest threat in the room, Damien. "No! Swipper!" I screamed, lunging for him. I missed. Swipper latched onto Damien's expensive leather boot, and then he bit down. Hard. Damien didn't flinch in pain. He reacted with pure, cold instinct. A low, vibrating snarl tore through the room. It wasn't a scream. It was a warning sound, deep and guttural, like a lion annoyed by a gnat. The sheer power of the noise shook the window panes in their frames. Damien kicked his leg out instinctively, sending Swipper sliding across the marble floor like a hockey puck. The ferret rolled, shook himself off, and looked confused but unhurt. I looked up at Damien in horror. His chest was heaving, his hands were curled into claws, and his eyes— I swear his eyes were glowing. They were burning with a bright, unnatural gold light. "Get that thing out of my sight," Damien roared. His voice vibrated in my bones. I scrambled over and scooped up Swipper, who was chattering proudly at his victory. "I'm so sorry. I don't know why he did that. He usually loves leather." Damien glared at me. He took a jerky step forward, inhaling sharply. The murderous rage in his face battled with something else. Hunger. He looked at me like he wanted to throttle me or devour me. "Kitchen," he commanded, pointing down the hall with a shaking hand. Now. Chapter 6. The Rules of the Den. The kitchen was a masterpiece. It was larger than my entire apartment. It had 2 industrial stoves, a walk-in fridge the size of a bedroom, and marble countertops that stretched for miles. Copper pots hung from a rack above a massive island. "This is your domain," Damien said. He had followed me in. He had calmed down, mostly. The gold in his eyes had faded back to that intense amber, but he was still watching me with a predatory gaze. "You have everything you need," he continued, leaning against the doorframe. "If you need ingredients, write a list. They will appear." Toby had been whisked away to his room by Martha, a kind elderly housekeeper who smelled of lavender and starch. So it was just me and the beast. "Thank you," I said, running my hand over the cool stainless steel of the stove. It's incredible. I've never cooked in a place like this." "Rules," Damien said abruptly. He crossed his massive arms over his chest. His biceps bulged. "We have rules in this house." I straightened up. "Okay, rules." "Rule 1, he listed, ticking a finger. "Breakfast is at 6, lunch at 1, dinner at 8. Do not be late. I have a high metabolism. I need to eat on schedule." "Got it," I nodded. "Clockwork meals." "Rule 2, he continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. "You and the boy stay in the East Wing. The West Wing is my private quarters. You do not go there. Ever. Even if you hear shouting. Even if you hear breaking things." I swallowed hard. "Breaking things?" "Okay," I whispered. West Wing is off limits. Understood. Rule 3, he said. He pushed off the doorframe and walked toward me. The air in the room seemed to get heavier with every step he took. You do not leave the estate grounds without my permission. The woods are dangerous, Layla. There are wolves, bears, hunters. He stopped inches from me. I had to crane my neck back to look him in the eye. He smelled intoxicating, like rain, pine needles, and raw, masculine power. It made my head spin. I wasn't planning on hiking, I said, backing up until my hip hit the granite counter. I was trapped. Good, he murmured. He reached out. His hand hovered near my face. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he was going to touch my cheek. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't know if I wanted to run away or lean into his touch. Instead, he reached past me and grabbed a red apple from the fruit bowl on the counter. "Make me a steak," he said. He brought the apple to his lips and took a bite. Crunch. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. Rare, bloody. I haven't eaten properly in days. He turned and walked away, leaving me trembling in the middle of the $1,000,000 kitchen. I let out a shaky breath I didn't know I was holding. He was terrifying. He was rude. He was clearly hiding something massive in that West Wing. But as I grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet, I couldn't stop thinking about the way his eyes had darkened when he looked at me. I was safe from the debt collectors now. I had saved Toby. But standing in the dragon's lair, holding a frying pan, I had a sinking feeling that I was in much more danger here than I had ever been in the city. Chapter 7. The Ghost in the West Wing. Life at the Vargr estate settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. It was a rhythm defined by silence, secrets, and an impossible amount of food. For 3 days, I didn't see much of Damien. He was a ghost in his own castle. But I knew he was there because of the empty plates. Every meal I sent up on the dumbwaiter, pan-seared scallops with truffle oil, herb-crusted rack of lamb, spicy Thai red curry, came back 40 minutes later, licked clean. And I mean clean. It was terrifyingly impressive. The man ate enough to feed a small army, yet from what I had seen, he didn't have an ounce of body fat. My world shrank to the stainless steel expanse of the kitchen and the cozy safety of the East Wing. Martha, the elderly housekeeper, was kind but tight-lipped. She moved through the house like a shadow, polishing silver and locking doors. "Martha," I asked one afternoon while kneading dough, "why do the ground floor windows have steel shutters? And why is the perimeter fence electrified? It seems extreme." "Best not to ask, dear," she said, not looking up from her polishing cloth. "Mr. Vargr values his privacy. And the woods, they have teeth." That was comforting. But privacy didn't explain the noises. The first night, I thought it was thunder, a low, rumbling vibration that shook the floorboards beneath my bed. But when I looked out the window, the moon was clear and full. The second night, I heard footsteps. They weren't normal footsteps. They were heavy, pacing thuds coming from the floor above, the West Wing, the Forbidden Zone. It sounded less like a man pacing and more like a caged tiger testing the bars of its cell. On the third afternoon, I was chopping carrots for a mirepoix when a blur of white and brown fur shot past my feet. "Swipper," I hissed, dropping the knife. My ferret had escaped his maximum security playpen again. He scrambled up the pantry shelves, chattering excitedly, his long body wiggling between jars of artisanal pasta sauce. In his mouth, he held a shiny, silver object. "Drop it," I commanded, holding out a piece of premium dried liver. "Trade, now." Swipper paused. He looked at the liver. He looked at the treasure in his mouth. He made a business decision. He dropped the object and snatched the treat. I leaned down to inspect the stolen goods. It was a cufflink, but not just any cufflink. It was heavy, made of solid platinum, and engraved with a strange, intricate symbol, a snarling wolf's head centered inside a crescent moon. "Where did you get this?" I whispered, reaching for it. Suddenly, the kitchen intercom on the wall buzzed. Buzzed. The harsh sound made me jump. It startled Swipper, too. He snatched the cufflink back up in his jaws and darted under the massive island, chattering in panic. "Swipper, no! Come back!" I hissed. But he was gone, scurrying back toward his travel cage in the corner of the pantry to stash his hoard. "Layla!" Damien's voice crackled through the speaker. It wasn't the polite voice of an employer. It was deep, rough, and commanded immediate obedience. I pressed the button, my hand shaking slightly. "Yes, sir?" "The doctor is here," he growled. "Bring the boy to the library, now." Chapter 8. The Miracle Worker. The library was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a cavernous room with ceilings that vanished into the shadows. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that smelled of old paper and history. A massive fire roared in the stone hearth, casting dancing orange light across the Persian rugs. Damien stood by the fireplace. He looked imposing in a dark navy suit that fit him a little too perfectly. He was holding a glass of amber liquid, his posture rigid. Next to him stood a man who looked completely out of place in this Gothic setting. He was wearing a pristine white medical coat. He had silver hair tied back in a neat, severe ponytail and wire-rimmed glasses perched on a sharp nose. He looked kind, but his eyes were ancient. They were a pale, watery blue that looked like they had seen centuries pass by. "Layla," Damien said, nodding at me. His gaze dropped to Toby, who was hiding behind my leg, clutching the fabric of my jeans. Damien's expression softened. It was just a fraction, a microscopic relaxation of his jaw, but I saw it. "This is Dr. Eris," Damien introduced. "He is a specialist, the best in his field." "Hello, young man," Dr. Eris said. His voice was incredibly soothing, like a calm river flowing over stones. He knelt down, bringing himself to Toby's eye level. "I hear you have a cough that won't go away." "It hurts my chest," Toby whispered, stepping out from behind me. "And sometimes I get dizzy." "I have something for that," Dr. Eris said with a gentle smile. He opened a sleek metal medical case on the coffee table. I leaned in, expecting pills or a stethoscope. Instead, there was a single glass vial resting on blue velvet. It was filled with a glowing, golden amber liquid that seemed to shimmer on its own. I stepped forward, my protective instinct flaring up like a shield. "What is that?" "The doctors at St. Jude's said he needed chemotherapy and radiation. They said his cells were deteriorating." "Primitive methods," Dr. Eris said softly, dismissing modern medicine with a wave of his hand. "They poison the body to save it. This is a bioregenerative serum. It targets the cellular decay directly. It repairs the damage at the source." "Is it approved?" I asked, my voice rising. "Is it safe?" I looked at Damien. I needed him to tell me this wasn't some snake oil. Damien looked me dead in the eye. The intensity of his gaze pinned me to the spot. "I would not let him touch the boy if it wasn't safe, Layla. I promise you." I searched his face for a lie. I found only absolute certainty. I didn't know why, but I trusted him. I nodded. Dr. Eris prepared the injection. "This will sting for just a moment, Tobias, like a mosquito bite." It was over in seconds. "There," Dr. Eris smiled, packing away the glowing vial. "You will feel sleepy now. When you wake up, the pain will be gone, and you will be very, very hungry." Toby blinked, his eyelids already drooping. "I'm sleepy now." Martha appeared as if summoned by magic and scooped the sleepy boy into her arms to take him to bed. I stood alone in the library with the two men. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. The crushing weight of fear I had carried for months was suddenly lifting. "Thank you," I said to Dr. Eris, my voice choking. Then I turned to Damien. "I don't know how I can ever repay you for this." Damien stared at me. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. The air between us crackled with a sudden, strange energy. "You repay me by staying," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "By cooking, by being here." He turned away abruptly, breaking the spell. He downed the rest of his drink in one swallow. Dr. Eris will visit weekly to monitor his progress, Damien said, his back to me. Go back to your work, Layla. He dismissed me, but as I walked to the door, I glanced back. Damien was gripping the mantelpiece so hard his knuckles were white. He was fighting something inside himself. I just didn't know what it was. Chapter 9. Midnight Hunger. I couldn't sleep. The digital clock on my bedside table read 2:14 a.m. I had checked on Toby 3 times. The change was nothing short of miraculous. His color was back, a healthy pink flush instead of the sickly gray. His breathing was deep and silent, the wheezing rattle completely gone. Dr. Eris was a wizard. And Damien Vargr? Damien was my hero. My throat felt dry. My silk pajamas were sticking to my back. I needed water. I slipped out of bed, tied my robe tight around my waist, and tiptoed down the massive, dark hallway toward the kitchen. The house was silent, but it felt alive. Moonlight streamed through the high windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. I pushed open the heavy kitchen door and froze. The fridge light was on. Someone was standing there. It was Damien. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't wearing a shirt at all. He was wearing low-slung gray sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his hips. His back was to me. It was a landscape of muscle, corded, defined, and shifting under his skin like living steel. He was covered in a sheen of sweat, his skin flushed as if he had just run a marathon. But it was the scars that caught my breath. Faint, jagged white lines crisscrossed his broad back. They looked like old claw marks. He slammed the fridge door shut. In one hand, he held a carton of milk. In the other, a block of cheddar cheese. He sensed me. He spun around. I gasped. His chest was heaving. His dark hair was messy and wild, falling into his eyes. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. They weren't just amber. In the semi-darkness of the kitchen, they were glowing. I didn't know you were down here, I stammered, clutching the lapels of my robe tighter. I just wanted water. He stared at me. He didn't speak. He dropped the cheese on the counter with a heavy thud. He walked toward me. He moved with a prowling grace that made my mouth go dry. He stopped inches from me. He radiated heat like a furnace. He smelled overwhelming, like the forest after a storm, like rain, pine, and deep, earthy musk. It was raw. It was primal. You shouldn't be wandering at night, little mouse, he rasped. His voice was a low, rough sound that seemed to darken the room. I couldn't sleep, I whispered, looking up at him. Toby, he's better. Thank you. Damien's eyes dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the amber. It seemed like he was fighting a losing battle with his own control. He reached out. His large, rough hand cupped my cheek. His skin was burning hot against mine. His thumb brushed over my bottom lip, dragging slightly. You smell like vanilla, he murmured, sounding like he was drunk on the scent. He inhaled deeply, his eyes fluttering shut for a second. It drives me insane. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. Is that a bad thing? It's a dangerous thing, he whispered. He leaned in. His face was so close I could feel his breath on my skin. The air was thick with tension. I closed my eyes, tilting my head back, waiting. Crash! A metal pot fell off the drying rack behind us. The sound echoed like a gong. We both jumped apart as if we'd been electrocuted. I spun around. Swipper poked his head out from behind the toaster, looking guilty. He had knocked over a saucepan in his quest for crumbs. Damien let out a frustrated roar that sounded very much like a bark. He ran a hand through his hair, stepping back into the shadows, his chest heaving. Go to bed, Layla, he commanded, his voice strained and tight. Before I do something we both regret. He grabbed the block of cheese and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me breathless, trembling, and staring at a very confused ferret next to the toaster. Chapter 10. The Serpent's Gift. The kitchen was a war zone of luxury ingredients. It was supply day, the one day a week when a white van arrived from the city to drop off groceries that cost more than my college tuition. I stood by the loading dock, clipboard in hand, checking off the list. Crate of Wagyu beef? Check. Imported black truffles? Check. A box of strawberries that smelled like summer sunshine? Check. The delivery driver, a nervous man with a sweaty forehead who refused to make eye contact, shoved a small, black velvet box into my hands. This was, included. For the head chef, he mumbled, practically throwing the clipboard back at me. He sprinted to his van, tires screeching as he peeled out of the driveway. Weird, I muttered. I wiped my hands on my apron and carried the box to the center island. It felt heavy. Expensive. I untied the silver ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside sat a dozen exquisite hand-painted chocolates. They looked expensive. Nestled in the center was a thick cream card. I picked it up. The handwriting was elegant and sharp. To the artist in the kitchen. Vargr doesn't appreciate beauty. He only consumes it. When you are ready to be treated like a queen, call me. J. Julian. The man from the boardroom, the competitor who had tried to recruit me right in front of Damien. A shiver of unease slid down my spine like an ice cube. How did he know I was here? How did he get a package past the electrified perimeter fence and the armed guards? What is that? The voice didn't come from a person. It came from a storm cloud. I jumped, dropping the card. Damien was standing in the doorway. He had entered silently, as usual. He was wearing a sharp gray suit, but he looked ready for a brawl. His nostrils were flared, his chest heaving. He wasn't looking at the chocolates. He was staring at the air around them, sniffing. "It came with the delivery," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It's just chocolates." Damien crossed the massive kitchen in 2 long strides. He didn't take the box gently. He snatched it from my hand. He brought it to his nose and inhaled deeply. His lip curled back, revealing a flash of white teeth. It was a snarl, a genuine, animalistic snarl of disgust. "Snake," he spat. "Excuse me?" "Trash," he corrected. He looked at the beautiful, gold-dusted truffles like they were radioactive waste. "Do not eat these." "Why?" I protested, reaching for the box. "They're Belgian truffles. They look delicious, and I haven't had chocolate in 6 months." Damien dropped the box onto the tile floor. Crunch. With a heavy leather boot, he stomped on it. The sound of expensive chocolate shattering and velvet tearing echoed through the silent kitchen. He ground his heel into the mess, turning the art into a brown smear. "Hey!" I shouted, stepping forward. "That was incredibly rude." Damien didn't apologize. He stepped into my personal space, backing me up until my hips hit the marble counter. The air around him was vibrating with heat and anger. "He is not courting you, Layla. He is hunting you," Damien growled. His voice was so low it rumbled in my chest. "Do not accept gifts from him. Do not speak to him. Do not even say his name in this house." "You don't own me, Damien," I argued, though my voice trembled as I looked up at him. "I can eat chocolate if I want to." He leaned down. His face was inches from mine. His amber eyes were burning, swirling with flecks of gold. "You live in my territory," he rasped. "You feed my wolf, my appetite. As long as you are under my roof, you are mine to protect. Do you understand?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me breathless, confused, and staring at a very expensive stain on the floor. Chapter 11. The Impossible Lift. Toby was feeling amazing. It had been 4 days since Dr. Eris's magic shot, and the transformation was nothing short of a miracle. My brother, who usually spent his afternoons wrapped in blankets, was currently sprinting across the manicured back lawn like an Olympic athlete. "Look at me, Layla. I'm faster than a rocket," Toby yelled, pumping his little arms. Swipper, the chaotic ferret, was hopping sideways through the clover, chasing a butterfly with 0 coordination and maximum enthusiasm. I sat on the patio steps, peeling a mountain of potatoes for tonight's shepherd's pie. The sun was warm on my face, the birds were singing, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Then, disaster struck. A heavy gardening truck, a massive flatbed loaded with bags of mulch, had been parked at the top of the sloping driveway. The two gardeners were chatting near the shed. They must have forgotten the parking brake. I heard a metallic clunk, followed by the groan of tires rolling on gravel. "Look out!" one of the gardeners shouted. I looked up. My blood turned to ice. The truck was rolling backward. It was gaining speed, gathering momentum as it rumbled down the slope, and it was heading straight for the stone fountain where Toby was tying his shoe. "Toby, move!" I screamed, dropping the bowl of potatoes. I scrambled to my feet, sprinting toward him, but the distance was too great. It was like running in a nightmare. My legs felt heavy, the air too thick. Toby froze. He looked up, his eyes wide, staring at the massive metal bumper rushing toward him. "Toby!" I shrieked. Then, a blur of gray motion shot past me. It moved faster than a person. It moved faster than thought. It was just a streak of wind and power. It was Damien. He had been walking out of the garage holding a coffee cup. He didn't tackle Toby. He didn't have time. Instead, he stepped in front of the truck. "Damien, no!" I screamed, skidding to a halt in the grass. Damien planted his feet in the soft earth. He slammed his hands against the back of the moving truck. Crunch. The sound was sickening. It sounded like a car crash. The metal bumper crumpled like aluminum foil under his grip. The heavy tires skidded, tearing deep ruts into the lawn. The truck groaned, shuddered, and stopped. Dead stopped. The engine hissed. The two gardeners were frozen by the shed, their mouths hanging open in pure shock. I stared, my brain refusing to process the image. Damien Vargr was holding back a 6-ton vehicle with his bare hands. He shoved the truck back, actually shoved it uphill a few inches, and roared at the frozen men. "The brake! Pull the brake!" One of the gardeners finally snapped out of his trance. He sprinted to the cab, scrambled inside, and slammed the emergency brake. Damien let go. He stepped back, shaking his hands out casually as if he had just lifted a heavy grocery bag, not a death machine. I ran to Toby, falling to my knees and checking him for injuries. "Are you okay? Did it hit you?" "That was awesome!" Toby shouted, his eyes shining with hero worship. "Did you see that, Layla? He stopped it, like Superman." I looked up at Damien. He was breathing heavily. He adjusted his torn cuffs, his face a mask of annoyance. "How?" I whispered, staring at the deep dents in the metal bumper where his fingers had been. "How did you do that? That's impossible." Damien looked at me. His eyes were wild, the amber swirling with bright, molten gold. He seemed to realize he had shown too much. He quickly shuttered his expression. "Adrenaline," he said curtly. "Mothers lift cars off babies all the time. Same principle." He turned and walked back toward the house before I could ask any more questions. I watched him go. Adrenaline didn't dent steel. Adrenaline didn't make a man move faster than the wind. I hugged Toby tight, my heart racing. That wasn't adrenaline. That was a monster. But he was a monster who had just saved my world. An hour later, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a nagging curiosity. I was in the kitchen making tea to calm my nerves, but Toby had gone straight to the living room. He wasn't playing with Swipper. He was sitting cross-legged on the rug, his iPad glowing on his lap. He had been unusually quiet since the Superman comment. Toby chewed his lip, staring at the screen. He replayed the memory in his head. The way the metal bumper had crumpled like paper, the sound of the engine dying against Damien's palms, and that noise, the low, vibrating rumble that had shaken Toby's chest before Damien spoke. "Superman isn't real," Toby whispered to himself. But that was real. He opened a search browser. His small fingers flew across the glass. "Man stops truck with bare hands." The results were just news stories about accidents or weightlifting records. He frowned and tried again. "Human eyes turn gold when angry. Growling sound from human chest." He scrolled past medical websites about liver failure and contact lens ads. Then he found a website dedicated to obscure European folklore. He clicked a link titled Legends of the Lycanthrope. The page loaded. There was a woodcut drawing from 100 years ago. It showed a man standing tall, a shadow of a wolf rising behind him. The text below it read, "In the old tales, the alpha is marked by unnatural strength, dominance, and eyes that shift to gold when provoked." Toby looked up from the iPad toward the hallway where Damien's office was. He looked back at the screen. The description fit perfectly. The strength, the eyes, the growl. Toby swallowed hard. The hero worship in his eyes shifted into something sharper, something smarter. "No way," Toby breathed, zooming in on the wolf shadow. "He's not a superhero. He's one of these." Chapter 12. The Red Dress. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Damien had locked himself in the West Wing for hours. I was in the kitchen, furiously chopping onions for the shepherd's pie. Chop, chop, chop. I was trying to make sense of what I saw. A man stopping a truck? A man growing claws? No, that was crazy. The kitchen door swung open. I spun around with the knife, half expecting a werewolf. It was Martha. She was carrying a large, glossy black box tied with a shimmering silver ribbon. "For you, dear," she said with a gentle smile, placing it on the island. "I'm not accepting any more packages," I said, pointing the oniony knife at the box. "If that's from Julian, tell him I'll set it on fire in the driveway." "It's not from Julian," Martha chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "It's from the master." I paused. "Damien bought me a gift?" "Open it. There is a note." I wiped my hands and untied the ribbon. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a dress, but calling it a dress felt like an insult. It was a gown made of deep, blood-red silk. It rippled like liquid fire. It was elegant, daring, and looked like it cost more than the truck Damien had dented. I picked up the heavy card resting on top. Rule number 4. The employee must accompany the employer to social functions when required. Be ready at 7 p.m. We are going to the Apex Charity Ball. D. "He's ordering me to go to a party?" I scoffed, reading the imperious note. "And he picked out a red dress? That's bold." "Red is a power color," Martha said with a knowing wink. "And you will need power where you are going. The gala is intense." I sighed. I looked at the dress. It was beautiful. And honestly, after the day I'd had, I wanted to wear armor. At 6:55 p.m., I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the hallway. The dress fit like a second skin. It hugged every curve, the silk flowing down to the floor in a pool of crimson. It had a slit up the leg that was bordering on scandalous, and a neckline that framed my collarbone perfectly. I put on the heels Martha had found. I felt dangerous. I heard a floorboard creak behind me. I turned around. Damien was standing at the bottom of the grand staircase. He was wearing a tuxedo, a black, tailored tuxedo that made his broad shoulders seem even wider. His white shirt contrasted with his tanned skin. The sight of him was devastating. He looked up. He saw me. He stopped dead. His hand gripped the wooden banister so hard I heard the wood groan in protest. His eyes traveled from my heels, up the slit in the dress, over my waist, and finally locked onto my face. His pupils dilated until his eyes were almost entirely black. He didn't say a word. He just stared, his chest rising and falling in a jagged, heavy rhythm. "Is it appropriate?" I asked nervously, smoothing the silk over my hip. Damien walked toward me. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a wolf stalking prey he intends to keep. He stopped right in front of me. The scent of him, spices, rain, and raw desire, enveloped me. "Appropriate?" he rasped. His voice was rougher than sandpaper. "No, it is dangerous." He reached out, his knuckles brushing my cheek. "You look like sin, Layla," he whispered. "And tonight, everyone will know you belong to me." He offered me his arm. "Shall we go?" Chapter 13. Wolves in Silk and Satin. The limousine ride was suffocatingly quiet. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat on the far right side of the plush leather seat, pressing myself against the door. I smoothed the red silk of my dress over my knees for the 100th time. My hands were shaking. I wasn't used to silk. I wasn't used to heels that cost more than my first car. I was used to grease stains, aprons, and worrying about electricity bills. Damien sat on the other side. He hadn't stopped staring at me since we left the estate. His gaze wasn't polite. It was heavy. It felt physical, like a warm weight resting on my skin. He looked at me the way a starving man looks at a feast. It made my stomach flip, partly from nerves, partly from something else I didn't want to name. "Stop staring," I whispered, turning my head to look out the tinted window. The city lights blurred by in streaks of gold and white. "I can't," he replied. His voice was low, vibrating in the small space of the cabin. "You are distracting." My breath hitched. I risked a glance at him. In the shadows of the car, his eyes looked darker, bottomless. He wasn't just my boss tonight. He was something else, something dangerous. The car slowed to a crawl. We had arrived. The grand obsidian hall loomed above us, a massive structure of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the city. It looked less like a ballroom and more like a fortress for the elite. Outside, a sea of photographers swarmed the entrance. The flashes of their cameras were blinding, exploding like strobe lights against the dark glass of the car. "Stay close," Damien commanded. The driver opened the door, and the noise of the crowd rushed in. Damien stepped out first. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket with a casual grace, ignoring the screaming paparazzi. The moment his foot hit the pavement, the shouting stopped. It was eerie. Usually, paparazzi yelled questions. "Who are you wearing?" "Mr. Vargr, over here!" But around Damien, they just shrank back. They lowered their cameras slightly, their faces pale. It was fear. Pure, instinctive fear. He reached his hand back into the car for me. "Layla." I took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and calloused. It was an anchor in the storm. I stepped out, the red dress flowing around my legs like liquid fire. We walked up the red carpet. I kept my head down, terrified I would trip. Damien didn't look at the cameras. He looked straight ahead, his jaw set, parting the crowd like the Red Sea. We reached the massive double doors. The attendants bowed low, too low, and swung them open. We stepped inside. The ballroom was a sea of luxury. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from the vaulted ceiling. The guests were impossibly beautiful. The women wore diamonds that sparkled under the lights. The men looked like they spent their free time fighting bears. But as we walked in, the music didn't stop. The air changed. Silence rippled through the room. It started near the door and spread outward like a wave. Within seconds, hundreds of heads turned. They weren't looking at Damien. They were looking at me. And then, they started doing that thing again. The same thing I had noticed in the boardroom. They were sniffing. I saw a woman in a shimmering silver gown flare her nostrils. Her eyes narrowed at me, hostile and cold. I saw a man near the bar inhale deeply, his head tilting to the side as he tracked our movement. I felt like a gazelle that had just wandered into a den of lions. "Why are they looking at me like that?" I whispered, leaning into Damien's side. I couldn't help it. My body instinctively sought his protection. "Is there spinach in my teeth? Is the dress ripped?" "No," Damien growled. His arm slid around my waist. He pulled me flush against his side. It wasn't a gentle hug. It was a clamp, a possessive gesture that screamed "mine" to everyone in the room. "They are looking because you are the only thing in this room that is real," he murmured near my ear. "They are all fake." He was lying. I could tell. They weren't looking at me because I was real. They were looking at me like I was an intruder, like I was a contaminant in their perfect world. "Ignore them," Damien said, his voice hardening. He guided me through the crowd, his body shielding me. If anyone gets too close, tell me. I will remove them. Remove them? I asked nervously, stumbling slightly in my heels. You mean ask them to leave? Damien didn't answer. He just glared at a waiter who looked at me for a second too long. The poor man went pale and almost dropped his tray of champagne. Chapter 14. The Collar of the Queen. An hour had passed and my nerves were fried. Damien had been dragged into a conversation with 3 elderly men who looked like retired generals. They were speaking in hushed, serious tones about territories, southern borders, and rogue incursions. It sounded like corporate jargon, but the intensity in their eyes was terrifying. I needed air. I stepped away just a few feet to grab a glass of water from a passing tray. Immediately, the circle of protection broke. I felt the eyes on me again. Sharp, hungry, judging. I turned to head back to Damien, but someone blocked my path. It was the woman in the silver dress. Up close, she was stunning, but her beauty was sharp, like a knife. Her eyes were a strange, vivid shade of green. She accidentally bumped into my shoulder. It was a hard check, enough to make me stumble and spill water on the floor. "Watch it, human," she sneered. I blinked, shocked by the venom in her voice. "Excuse me?" She leaned in. She smelled of expensive perfume and something muskier, something wild. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "He's just playing with you. He'll get bored, and when he does, you'll be dinner." My blood ran cold. Dinner? She opened her mouth to say more, but suddenly she froze. Her eyes went wide, looking over my shoulder. She backed away quickly, disappearing into the crowd. A warm, heavy hand wrapped around my upper arm. I jumped. It was Damien. He looked furious. His jaw was clenched so tight a muscle was ticking in his cheek. He had seen the interaction. "Did she touch you?" he demanded. His voice was a low rumble that I felt in my chest. She just bumped me," I stammered. "She said I didn't belong." "She is a fool," Damien spat. "Come with me." He didn't ask. He dragged me, literally dragged me, toward the balcony doors. He moved with a speed and strength that made resistance impossible. We burst out onto the balcony. The night air was cool and crisp, a relief after the stifling heat of the ballroom. The city lights twinkled below us, miles away. We were high up, isolated from the madness inside. Damien didn't let go of me. He pulled me into a dark corner of the terrace, away from the glass doors. He reached into his tuxedo pocket. "I should have done this before we entered," he muttered to himself. "I didn't think they would be this bold. I didn't think they would dare." He pulled out a black velvet box. He snapped it open. I gasped. Inside lay the most beautiful necklace I had ever seen. It was a heavy silver chain, intricate and ancient-looking. In the center hung a pendant, a massive, dark blue sapphire carved into the shape of a crescent moon. It was surrounded by tiny diamonds that looked like stars. It didn't look like modern jewelry. It looked like an artifact. It looked like something a queen would wear in a history book. "Damien," I breathed, staring at the blue stone. "I can't accept this. That looks like a museum piece. It must cost a fortune." "It is an heirloom," he said, his voice rough with emotion. He took the necklace out of the box. "It belonged to my mother, and her mother before her." I took a step back. "Then you definitely shouldn't give it to me. I'm just your chef, Damien. I can't wear your mother's necklace." "Turn around," he commanded. "Damien, Turn around, Layla." I didn't argue. I couldn't. There was a desperate note in his voice that silenced me. I turned my back to him, lifting my heavy hair off my neck. I felt his fingers brush against the sensitive skin of my nape. His touch was burning hot, a stark contrast to the cool night air. I shivered, goosebumps rising on my arms. He draped the chain around my neck. The silver was heavy. It settled on my collarbone with a weight that felt permanent. He fastened the clasp. "Do not take this off," Damien whispered. His lips were right at my ear. I could feel his warm breath sending shivers down my spine. Not to shower, not to sleep, never. Why? I whispered back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Because, he said. He put his hands on my shoulders and turned me around to face him. His eyes were intense, searching mine. When you wear this, every person in that room knows exactly who you are to me. It marks you. It protects you. He looked down at the sapphire resting against my skin, then back up to my eyes. A look of raw possessiveness crossed his face. You look like a queen, he said softly. The air between us crackled with electricity. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to. I wanted to forget about the debt, the sickness, the weird sniffing people, and just be kissed by him. But before he could lean in, the balcony door creaked open. Interrupting something? A smooth voice drawled. Chapter 15. The Serpent's Dance. The air on the balcony suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Julian stood in the doorway, blocking our path back to the ballroom. He wore a white tuxedo that gleamed in the moonlight, a sharp contrast to Damien's darkness. He held 2 glasses of champagne, his smile not reaching his eyes. It was a predator's smile. Julian, Damien growled. The sound came from deep in his chest, vibrating through the arm he still had wrapped around my waist. Leave. Always so rude, Vargr, Julian tutted, stepping onto the terrace. I just came to pay my respects to the lovely lady. His gaze dropped to my neck. He saw the necklace. For a split second, his mask slipped. His eyes widened in genuine shock. Well, well, he whispered, his voice losing its oily charm. The Luna's Crescent. You play for keeps, don't you? I would love to, Julian said, recovering his smirk, ignoring the threat in the air. But the council elders are asking for you inside. Something about the Northern Territory borders? They seem impatient. Damien stiffened. He looked at Julian, then down at me. I could feel the conflict radiating off him. He didn't want to leave me. Go, I whispered, touching his rigid arm. If it's important, go. I have the necklace, right? You said it protects me. Damien hesitated. He glared at Julian one last time. If you speak to her, if you even look at her wrong, I will know. Go do your business, Alpha. Julian waved a hand dismissively. Damien squeezed my hand one last time, a silent promise, and stormed past Julian back into the ballroom. I was alone with the snake. I turned to the railing, pretending to look at the view, hoping he would just walk away. He didn't tell you, did he? Julian's voice was right behind my ear. I jumped, spinning around. He had moved silently. Tell me what? About the curse, Julian whispered. He took a sip of his champagne, watching me over the rim of the glass. That necklace, it's beautiful, but the last human girl who wore it, she didn't have a happy ending. My hand flew to the sapphire pendant. What happened to her? She was torn apart, Julian said, his voice dropping to a cruel hiss. Wolves don't play nice with pets, Layla. They eat them. I'm not a pet, I said, my voice trembling but defiant. And Damien isn't a wolf. He's a businessman. Julian laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Is he? Then ask him about the serum Dr. Eris gave your brother. Ask him why a businessman has a private lab with unlicensed genetic modifiers. My blood froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. How do you know about Toby? I know everything, Julian said, stepping closer. He crowded me against the stone railing, eliminating the air between us. I know about the debt. I know about the illegal medical procedures. If I made one phone call to the medical board, your brother would be taken into state custody, and you would be in prison. No, I gasped. Tears pricked my eyes. Please, leave him out of this. Dance with me, Julian commanded. He grabbed my wrist. His skin was clammy and cold. One dance, and maybe I'll forget to make that call. I was paralyzed. I had no choice. He pulled me back inside the ballroom. The music was a slow, haunting waltz. He swept me onto the floor. I felt sick. I looked around desperately for Damien, but the crowd was too thick. "He's a monster, Layla," Julian whispered into my hair as he spun me. "He thinks he owns you, but you're just bait. You're just a weakness I can use to break him." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened painfully on my waist. "Let me go." "Not yet," Julian smirked. "I want him to see this." And then the music died. It didn't fade out. It was cut short, as if the orchestra had been strangled. The chatter in the room vanished instantly. I looked toward the entrance of the ballroom. Damien was standing there. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He wasn't the man who liked my beef stew. He was pure, unadulterated violence. His tuxedo jacket was straining across his shoulders. His hands were open claws. And his eyes. They were glowing. Bright, molten gold. He didn't walk. He didn't run. He blurred. "Get your hands off my mate!" The roar shook the glass walls. It wasn't a human shout. It was the sound of a beast that had just found its prey. Chapter 16. The Silent Hurricane. The ballroom erupted into chaos, but I didn't see any of it. All I saw was Damien. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat. He shoved Julian backward with a force that sent the man flying across the polished floor. Julian crashed into a table of champagne flutes, glass shattering everywhere. Damien didn't chase him. He turned to me. His chest was heaving. His golden eyes were wild, scanning my face, my neck, my arms. He looked like he was about to tear the world apart to find a scratch on me. "Did he hurt you?" he snarled. His voice was unrecognizable, distorted, guttural, terrifying. I shook my head, too scared to speak. I was trembling so hard my teeth chattered. Damien didn't wait. He grabbed my hand. His grip was iron. "We are leaving," he announced to the silent, terrified room. "Now." He dragged me toward the exit. He didn't care about the staring guests. He didn't care about the spilled drinks or the ruined gala. He marched me through the double doors and out into the night. The paparazzi were still waiting, but as Damien burst through the entrance, practically towing me behind him, not a single camera flashed. The reporters lowered their lenses, stepping back in unison. They smelled the danger rolling off him in waves. "Car," Damien barked at the valet. "Bring it, now." The valet scrambled, tripping over his own feet. Within seconds, the black sedan screeched to a halt in front of us. Damien ripped the passenger door open. He didn't help me in. He practically shoved me into the leather seat. He slammed the door shut with a force that rocked the entire vehicle. He was in the driver's seat a second later. He hit the locks. Click. We peeled out of the driveway, the tires smoking against the asphalt. The drive down the mountain was a nightmare. Damien drove like a madman. The speedometer climbed higher and higher, 80, 90, 100. He took the curves so fast, I had to grab the handle above the door to keep from slamming into the window. "Damien, slow down!" I cried out. "You're going to kill us!" "I am in control," he growled, though his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "You are not in control!" I yelled back, finding my voice through the fear. "You just assaulted a man in front of hundreds of people. You roared at him, and you called me—" I paused, the word feeling heavy on my tongue. "Mate." The car swerved slightly. Damien corrected it instantly. "What does it mean?" I demanded. "You called me mate. Julian said you're a monster. He said the last girl died. Tell me the truth." Damien slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt on the deserted highway, the seatbelt cutting into my chest. Silence filled the car. Heavy, suffocating silence. Damien turned to me. The gold in his eyes was fading, returning to that deep, soulful brown, but the anguish in them was clear. He looked like a man who was fighting a war inside his own head. "It means," he whispered, his voice cracking, "that Julian made a mistake he will pay for." "That's not an answer." "It is the only answer I have right now," he said, staring at my hands. I cannot explain it yet, Layla. Not while the blood is rushing in my ears. Not while I still want to go back there and finish him." He took a deep breath, forcing his hands to relax on the wheel. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "Did he touch you? Aside from the dance?" "He threatened Toby," I whispered. Tears finally spilled over my cheeks. "He knows about the serum. He said he'd take him away." A low growl started in Damien's chest. It was involuntary. The car seemed to vibrate with it. "He will never touch the boy," Damien vowed. He looked at me, his gaze intense and burning. "I told you, I protect what is mine. And you, and the boy, you are mine." He put the car back in gear. He drove slower this time, but the tension didn't leave. I sat there, clutching the seatbelt, realizing that I was trapped in a speeding car with a man who was clearly not just a man. And the most terrifying part? I felt safer with him than I did anywhere else. Chapter 17. The Safe Haven. The iron gates of the Vargr estate swung open as we approached. As we drove up the long, winding driveway, the sight of the massive stone house, which had once looked like a gloomy castle, now looked like a sanctuary. Damien parked the car at the front steps. He killed the engine. "Wait," he said. He got out and walked around to my side. He opened my door. He didn't drag me this time. He offered me his hand. His movements were stiff, controlled, like he was trying very hard to be gentle. I took his hand. My legs were shaky as I stepped out onto the gravel. "Go inside," he said softly. "Check on him." I didn't need to be told twice. I dropped his hand and ran. I pushed through the heavy oak doors, my heels clicking loudly on the marble foyer. "Toby?" I called out, my voice echoing in the large hall. "Toby!" Panic clawed at my throat. What if Julian had already called someone? What if the police were here? What if the house was empty? "Layla?" A small, sleepy voice drifted down from the top of the grand staircase. I looked up. My knees almost gave out with relief. Toby was sitting on the top step, rubbing his eyes. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas. Beside him, Swipper was curled into a ball of fur, fast asleep. "Toby!" I abandoned all dignity. I kicked off my expensive heels and ran up the stairs in my bare feet. I scooped him into my arms, burying my face in his neck. He smelled like lavender soap and warm milk. He was real. He was safe. "You're squishing me," Toby giggled, though he hugged me back tightly. "You're home early. Was the party boring?" "It was loud," I choked out, pulling back to look at his face. He looked healthy. His cheeks were pink. "Why are you awake, buddy?" "Swipper was hungry," Toby said, pointing to the ferret. "And I heard the car." I heard the heavy front door click shut downstairs, followed by a heavy footstep behind me. I stiffened, turning around while keeping a protective arm around Toby. Damien was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He had taken off his tuxedo jacket and undone his tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the base of his throat. He appeared exhausted, utterly broken. He was watching us. His expression wasn't angry anymore. It was filled with a longing so deep it hurt to look at. He looked like a man starving for something he thought he could never have. "Did you bring cake?" Toby asked, looking over my shoulder at the Billionaire. Damien blinked, snapping out of his trance. He cleared his throat. "I did not," Damien said, his voice grave. He walked up the first few steps. "The cake at the party was dry. It was not acceptable." Toby nodded solemnly. "Layla makes better cake." "She does," Damien agreed. His eyes flicked to mine. The gold was gone, but the heat remained. "Mr. Damien?" Toby asked. "Can you lift the truck again tomorrow? That was awesome." My heart stopped. I froze. I knew Toby had seen it. He'd screamed it at the top of his lungs in the driveway. But hearing him bring it up now, so casually, made the danger feel real again. I had hoped he'd forgotten it like a dream. Damien paused. He looked at the small boy, then at me. "Maybe," he said softly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "If you eat your vegetables, strong men eat their greens." "Deal," Toby yawned. "Bedtime," I whispered, kissing Toby's forehead. "Go on. I'll come tuck you in 5 minutes." Toby picked up the sleeping ferret and shuffled off toward his room. I stood up slowly. I was alone on the stairs with Damien. The domestic moment was over. The reality of the night came crashing back. "He is safe," Damien said quietly. "The estate is locked down. The security system is comprehensive. No one gets in without my permission." "For now," I whispered, clutching the Luna necklace. "But we need to talk, Damien. No more riddles, no more secrets." Damien looked at me. He nodded once. "Library," he said. 5 minutes. I will pour the whiskey." Chapter 18. The Interrogation. The library was dim, lit only by the dying embers in the massive stone fireplace and a single lamp on the desk. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and the sharp, peat-heavy scent of whiskey. Damien stood by the mantel. He had discarded his tuxedo jacket on a chair. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck, and the top buttons of his shirt were open, revealing the strong column of his throat. He looked like a man who had just walked through a war zone. He held a crystal glass of amber liquid in one hand. He drained it in a single swallow as I closed the heavy oak door behind me. The click of the latch echoed in the silence. "You came," he said, his back still turned to me. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. "I live here, Damien," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I'm not going to sleep until I get answers. 3 questions. You promised." He turned around slowly. The firelight cast long shadows across his face, making his sharp cheekbones look even more severe. The gold in his eyes had faded back to a deep, intense brown, but they were still watching me with a hunger that made my knees weak. "Ask," he said. I took a breath, clutching the cold silver of the Luna necklace for courage. "Question 1, I said, stepping further into the room. "Julian called you a monster. You lifted a 2-ton truck like it was a toy. Your eyes glow when you're angry. What are you?" Damien didn't flinch. He poured himself another splash of whiskey. "I am a creature of instinct, Layla. My family, my bloodline, carries a genetic trait. We are stronger, faster, and more possessive than others." He looked at me over the rim of his glass. "The world has many names for us. Shapeshifters, beasts, wolves." He took a sip. "We call ourselves Lycan." "Lycan," I repeated. The word felt heavy in the air. "So, werewolves? Like in the movies? Do you howl at the moon?" "We do not howl at the moon," he said dryly. "Though the moon does affect our temper. We are territorial, we protect our pack, and we destroy anything that threatens what is ours." I swallowed hard. It should have been terrifying, standing in a locked room with a werewolf, but looking at him, at the exhaustion in his shoulders, the way he looked at me like I was his lifeline, I didn't feel fear. I felt drawn to him. "Question 2, I continued. "Why me? Why are you so obsessed with my cooking? Why did you hire a nobody chef and move her entire family into your mansion?" He set the glass down on the mantel with a heavy thud. He walked toward me. He didn't stop until he was looming over me, stealing the air from my lungs. "Because my wolf was starving," he murmured. "I was going feral, Layla, losing my mind to the beast inside. Nothing satisfied the hunger. No food, no drink, no peace. Until you." He reached out. His hand hovered near my face, trembling slightly. "Your scent calms the rage. Your food nourishes the wolf. You are the anchor that keeps me human." "So I'm a tranquilizer," I whispered, feeling a pang of hurt. "I'm just a tool to keep you sane." "No," he growled. The sound vibrated in my chest. He closed the distance, his hand cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed over my bottom lip, his skin burning hot against mine. "You are not a tool. You are my mate." "That's the word you roared," I said breathlessly. Question 3. What does mate mean? Damien's eyes flared with a flicker of gold. He lowered his forehead until it rested against mine. I could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. "It means," he breathed, "that you are the other half of my soul. It means that biology, fate, and the universe decided that I belong to you. It means that if anyone tries to hurt you, I will burn this city to ash to keep you safe." He pulled back slightly to look into my eyes. "It means I love you, Layla, in a way that is terrifying and absolute." My world tilted on its axis. He loved me. The billionaire alpha werewolf loved me. "And the last girl?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The one Julian said was torn apart?" Damien's face hardened. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a wall of stone. "That," he said, his expression darkening, "was not my doing. She was hunted by a rival pack to get to me. I failed to protect her. I will not fail you." He stepped back. "Now go to bed, Layla, before I forget that I am trying to be a gentleman." Chapter 19. The Breakfast Reveal. The morning sun streamed through the massive kitchen windows, hitting the copper pots and making them gleam. It was a cheerful, normal Tuesday morning. It felt completely wrong. I stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. My hands were on autopilot, but my brain was still stuck in the library. Lycan, mate, soul. I hadn't slept a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Damien's glowing eyes. I felt his hand on my cheek. I heard his growl. I looked over at the kitchen island. Toby was sitting there, swinging his legs. He was happily drowning a stack of pancakes in syrup. Swipper was on the counter next to him, trying to steal a piece of bacon. I took a deep breath. I had to tell him. Julian had threatened to take Toby away. I couldn't keep him in the dark anymore. He needed to know that we were living in a dangerous world. "Toby," I said, turning off the stove. I wiped my hands on my apron and leaned against the counter. "We need to have a serious talk." Toby looked up, his mouth full of pancake. "Am I in trouble? It was Swipper who chewed your sneakers." "No, you're not in trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's about Mr. Vargr, Damien." Toby swallowed. "What about him?" "Have you noticed that he's different?" I started carefully. "That he's really strong, and sometimes he acts a little strange?" I watched my brother closely. I was prepared for him to be scared. I was prepared to pack our bags and run if he freaked out. Toby shrugged. "You mean 'cause he's a wolf man?" I froze. The spatula slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. "What?" I choked out. "He's a wolf man," Toby said casually, stabbing another piece of pancake. "I saw him lift the truck, and then I Googled it. The internet says alphas have super strength and gold eyes, plus he growls at the mailman." Toby chewed thoughtfully and added, "And he smells like a dog, but in a good way." My jaw dropped. You knew? And you didn't say anything?" "I thought it was a secret," Toby said, eyes wide. "Like a superhero's secret identity. I didn't want to blow his cover." He paused, looking thoughtful. "Do you think he can turn me?" "Turn you?" I shrieked. "No, absolutely not." "But imagine, Layla." Toby's eyes lit up. "I could have claws. I could run super fast. I could eat my homework and nobody would question it." "Nobody is eating homework." Just then, the kitchen door swung open. Damien walked in. He was showered and dressed in a fresh charcoal suit, looking like the perfect CEO again. But there were dark circles under his eyes. He stopped when he saw us. He sensed the tension immediately. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze darting to me. "He knows," I said, pointing at my 7-year-old brother. Damien stiffened. "He knows what?" "That you're a wolf," Toby said, grinning. "Can I join the pack? I promise I won't shed on the furniture. Swipper sheds way more than me." Damien stared at the boy. For a moment, he looked completely baffled. The Alpha King, who terrified board members and rival packs, was being interrogated by a child with syrup on his chin. "You want to join the pack?" Damien asked slowly. "Yes," Toby hopped off the stool. I can be a scout or a spy. Do I get a cool name? Like Shadowfang or Bone Crusher? Damien looked at me. A corner of his mouth twitched. Then he looked back at Toby. We can discuss your code name later, Damien said solemnly. But first, you must finish your breakfast. Pack members need protein. Toby pumped his fist in the air. Yes! Shadowfang needs bacon! I sank onto a stool, burying my face in my hands. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It was hysterical. I was terrified of Julian, confused by the mate bond, and my little brother was trying to negotiate a superhero contract with a werewolf. Damien walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. He has the heart of a beta, Damien murmured, amusement coloring his voice. He is brave. He's an idiot, I laughed, wiping a tear from my eye. And so are you. Perhaps, Damien said. He picked up a piece of bacon from Toby's plate and ate it. But we are your idiots. Chapter 20. The Warning. The happiness lasted exactly 45 minutes. We were still in the kitchen. Toby was helping, or trying to help, Martha load the dishwasher, which mostly involved him asking if he could put Swipper inside for a wash. The answer was a firm no. Damien was leaning against the counter, drinking his third cup of black coffee, watching us with that faint, satisfied smile that made my heart flutter. It felt normal. It felt safe. Then, the gate intercom buzzed, followed moments later by the doorbell. It wasn't the soft chime of a guest. It was a long, insistent buzz that echoed through the high ceilings of the foyer. Damien's smile vanished instantly. His posture changed. One second he was relaxed, the next he was rigid, his head tilted slightly as he listened. "Stay here," he commanded softly. "It's probably just the mail," I said, drawing my hands on a towel, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. Damien walked out of the kitchen. I didn't listen to him. I followed, stopping in the doorway of the hall. Martha opened the heavy front door. A man in a cheap brown suit stood there, looking annoyed that security had searched his car. He wasn't a guest. He held a thick manila envelope. "Delivery for Ms. Layla Evans," the man said, looking bored. "I'll take it," Damien rumbled, stepping forward. "Needs to be her, pal," the man said, chewing gum. "Legal requirement." I stepped out from behind Damien. My legs felt like jelly. "I'm Layla." The man thrust the envelope into my hands. "You've been served." He turned and walked away without looking back. I looked down at the envelope. It had the seal of the State Department of Child and Family Services stamped in red ink. My hands started to shake so hard the paper rattled. "Layla," Damien said, his voice low and urgent. "Open it." I tore the flap open. I pulled out the papers. The words swam before my eyes, but the bold headers screamed at me. Notice of Emergency Welfare Investigation. Subject: Tobias Evans, minor. Allegation: medical neglect, use of unlicensed experimental substances. "He did it," I whispered. The air left my lungs. "Julian called them." Damien snatched the papers from my numb fingers. His eyes scanned the document in seconds. A low, terrifying growl started deep in his chest. It wasn't loud, but the vase of flowers on the hallway table rattled against the wood. "He claims Dr. Eris injected Toby with unverified narcotics," Damien read, his voice dripping with ice. "He claims you are an unfit guardian endangering a child's life." "They're going to take him," I choked out. The panic wasn't a wave, it was a tsunami. I couldn't breathe. "Damien, they're going to put him in foster care. He needs his meds. He needs me." I turned to run back to the kitchen, to grab Toby and run, but Damien grabbed my arms. "Stop," he ordered. "Let me go," I cried, struggling against his iron grip. "We have to leave. We have to pack." "And go where?" Damien shook me gently. "To a motel? The police will find you in an hour. Then you will look like a fugitive and you will lose him forever." "Then what do we do?" I screamed, tears hot and fast on my face. "We can't fight the government. Julian has money. He has connections." Damien pulled me into his chest. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my hair. He was shaking, but not with fear, with rage. "Julian has money," Damien whispered into my ear, his voice dark and promising. "But I have an army. He wants a war? I will give him a war." Chapter 21. The War Room. Damien didn't let go of me until we reached his office in the West Wing. I had never been in this room before. It was massive, dominated by a desk made of dark, ancient wood that looked like it had been carved from a ship's hull. The walls were lined with maps, not just of the city, but of the surrounding forests, marked with red and black lines. Territories. "Sit." Damien pointed to a leather chair. He didn't sit, he paced. He picked up the landline phone on his desk. He didn't dial a number, he just pressed a single button. "Blackwood," Damien barked into the receiver. "Get to the estate. Bring the legal team. Bring the enforcers." He paused, listening. "I don't care if you're in court," Damien snarled. "Leave. Julian just served Layla with a custody order. He is coming for the boy." He slammed the phone down. I sat in the chair, hugging my knees. "Damien, maybe we should just give them what they want. Maybe if I apologize to Julian—" Damien stopped pacing. He turned to me slowly. His eyes were flashing gold again. "Apologize?" he repeated, incredulous. "You want to apologize to the snake who is trying to steal your brother?" "I want to keep Toby safe," I argued. "Julian said if I danced with him, he might forget. Maybe if I leave here, if I quit—" "If you leave here," Damien said, walking around the desk to crouch in front of me, "Julian wins. He will take the boy anyway, just to hurt me. He doesn't care about Toby. He cares about breaking me. And he knows you are how he does that." He took my cold hands in his. "Listen to me, Layla. In the human world, lawyers fight with paper. In my world, we fight with teeth. Today, we will use both." "But Dr. Eris," I whispered, "the serum was experimental. Technically, Julian isn't lying. If they test Toby's blood—" "They won't get near his blood," Damien vowed. "Dr. Eris is already erasing the digital trail. By the time the social worker arrives tomorrow, Toby's medical records will show a standard treatment plan approved by 3 different specialists." I blinked. "You can do that?" "I own the hospital, Layla," he said simply. "I own the insurance company. I can rewrite reality if I have to." He squeezed my hands. "But I need you to be strong. You are the Luna now. Even if you don't wear the title yet, you wear the necklace. And Lunas do not run. They stand their ground." I looked down at the sapphire crescent moon resting against my chest. It felt warm. I thought about Toby in the kitchen, eating pancakes, dreaming of being a superhero called Shadow Fang. I thought about the fear in his eyes when he was sick. I thought about Julian's oily smile. Damien was right. Running wouldn't work. I took a deep breath. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "We fight," Damien smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a sharp, dangerous smile that promised violence. "Good," he said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dense forest surrounding the estate. "Blackwood will be here in 10 minutes. And tonight? Tonight I will pay a visit to Julian." "A visit?" I asked, alarmed. "Damien, you can't kill him." "I won't kill him," Damien said, his reflection in the glass looking like a shadow. "Not yet. But I am going to remind him why wolves are at the top of the food chain." Chapter 22. The Legal Shield. 10 minutes later, the gravel of the driveway crunched under tires. I watched from the library window as 3 black SUVs pulled up in a perfect line. They looked like government vehicles, or maybe a SWAT team. The doors opened in unison. A man stepped out of the lead car. He was tall, thin, and wore a suit that was so sharp it could probably cut glass. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with a terrifying sense of purpose. "Mr. Blackwood," Damien said from behind me, my personal counsel, and the pack's fixer. We went to meet them in the foyer. Mr. Blackwood didn't smile. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply nodded at Damien, a gesture of respect that bordered on submission. Alpha, Blackwood said. His voice was dry and crisp, like turning a page in a law book. We have secured the perimeter. The enforcers are stationed at every gate. And the paperwork? Damien asked. Already in motion. Blackwood turned his gaze to me. His eyes were gray and calculating. He looked at me not as a person, but as a variable in a complex equation. Ms. Evans, we have work to do. We sat in the library. Blackwood spread documents across the coffee table with surgical precision. Here is the narrative, Blackwood began, tapping a fresh medical file. We have altered the admission diagnosis. Tobias was never suffering from cellular degeneration. The records now state he had severe chronic bronchitis. He was treated by Dr. Aris using a standard FDA-approved course of amoxicillin. The serum Julian saw does not exist. It was a vitamin B12 shot for energy. I stared at the file. It looked real. It had dates, signatures, and pharmacy receipts. It was a complete fabrication. But the hospital knows, I stammered. The nurses at St. Jude's saw his charts before we left. St. Jude's is a subsidiary of Vargr Medical, Blackwood said calmly. The digital records have been updated. The physical files were misplaced and replaced with correct copies this morning. I looked at Damien. He was leaning against the mantel, watching the lawyer work. He looked like a general commanding his troops. Is this legal? I whispered. It is necessary, Damien answered. Laws are written by men, Layla. We play by different rules. Blackwood handed me a script. Tomorrow, a social worker named Mrs. Gable will arrive at 10 a.m. She is strict, but she follows protocol. You will be polite. You will be calm. You will tell her that Julian is a disgruntled business rival of Mr. Vargr who is using your family to harass him. I can't lie, I said, my hands shaking. I'm a terrible liar. My face gets red. Damien moved then. He walked over and knelt beside my chair. He took the script from my hands and tossed it onto the table. Look at me, he commanded. I looked into his eyes. They were dark, steady, and filled with a fierce protectiveness. You are not lying, he said firmly. You are protecting your brother. Think of Toby. Think of him in a foster home, scared and alone. Think of him without you. A chill went down my spine. The image of Toby crying in a strange room ignited a spark of anger in my chest. Good, Damien said, seeing the change in my eyes. Hold on to that anger. Use it. When that woman comes tomorrow, you don't need to be a liar. You need to be a sister who is sick of being bullied. I took a deep breath. He was right. I wasn't the victim here. Julian was the villain. Okay, I said, sitting up straighter. I can do that. Excellent, Blackwood said, packing up his files. I will remain in the guest cottage tonight. If anything happens, press the panic button on your phone. Damien stood up. He buttoned his black shirt, covering the hollow of his throat. He walked to the wall where a display case held an array of antique daggers. He didn't take one, but he ran his hand over the glass. Layla, he said, his back to me. Go upstairs. Stay with the boy. Lock the door. Where are you going? I asked, standing up. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. It was no longer about legal defense. It was about offense. Damien turned. His face was a mask of cold, predatory intent. I have meetings to attend, he said smoothly, and a message to deliver.
Chapter 23. The Night Hunt. The city at night smelled of exhaust, rain, and fear. I parked the sedan 3 blocks away from the Obsidian Tower. It was Julian's stronghold, a glass needle piercing the sky, filled with security guards, cameras, and enough money to buy a small country. To a human, it was a fortress. To me, it was a cage, and the rat was inside. I didn't take the elevator. Elevators were traps. I moved to the service entrance in the back alley. 2 guards stood by the heavy steel door, smoking cigarettes. They didn't hear me approach. I moved with the silence of a shadow. I stepped into the light. The first guard jumped, reaching for his stun baton. "Don't," I said softly. He froze. My eyes caught the light of the street lamp, flashing gold. He smelled it then, the scent of an alpha. It triggered a primal instinct in his lizard brain. "Predator. Run." He dropped the baton. His partner was already backing away, hands up. "Key card," I demanded. The first guard threw it at me. They scrambled away into the darkness, smart enough to know that their paycheck wasn't worth dying for. I entered the building. The stairs were long, but I didn't feel the burn. My blood was boiling. The image of Layla's terrified face when she held those custody papers was burned into my retina. She had cried. He made her cry. My wolf snarled in my head, clawing at my rib cage, demanding to be let out. Kill him. Rip his throat out. Bring his heart to the mate. "Not yet," I told the beast. "Death is too easy. He needs to know fear first." I reached the penthouse floor. I swiped the stolen card. The door clicked open. Julian's apartment was like him, cold, expensive, and soulless. White leather furniture, modern art that looked like blood splatters, and a wall of windows overlooking the city he thought he owned. Julian was sitting on the white sofa, a glass of scotch in his hand. He was watching the news. He looked relaxed, smug. He didn't hear the door open. He didn't hear me walk across the marble floor. I stopped right behind the sofa. I could smell him, expensive cologne masking the sour scent of envy. "Good scotch?" I asked. Julian screamed. It was a satisfying sound. He leaped up, spinning around, dropping the glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing amber liquid onto the pristine white rug. "Vargr!" he gasped, clutching his chest. "How the hell did you get in here? Security!" "Your security is smart," I said, stepping over the broken glass. "They chose life." "Get out!" Julian hissed, backing away toward the fireplace. "I'll call the police. I'll call the press. You can't just break into my home." "You broke into mine," I growled. My voice dropped, becoming less human. "You sent a stranger to my door. You threatened a child." I took a step forward. Julian took two back. He grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace stand. "Stay back!" he yelled. He reached into a display case on the wall and snatched a jagged, decorative dagger. The metal gleamed with a whitish hue. "Pure sterling silver! I know what burns you, wolf." "Silver burns," I said calmly, eyeing the blade. "But you have to be fast enough to use it." I moved. I crossed the room faster than a human synapse could fire. I didn't grab the blade. I struck his wrist, shattering the bone. Julian screamed and dropped the dagger. It clattered uselessly to the floor. I grabbed him by the throat. I lifted him off his feet. I walked him backward until his back hit the floor-to-ceiling window. "Listen closely," I snarled, bringing my face inches from his. My eyes were fully gold now, illuminating the terror on his own. "You think this is a game. You think because you have money you can hunt my mate." Julian clawed at my hand, his face turning purple. "Layla is mine," I whispered. "The boy is mine. If you send another letter, if you make another phone call, if you even think about them." I tightened my grip just enough to let him feel death brushing against his skin. "I will not send lawyers," I promised. "I will come back here, and I will leave the window open on my way out." I let him go. He collapsed to the floor, coughing and gasping for air. He curled into a ball, shaking violently. "Cancel the hearing," I commanded, looking down at him. "Tomorrow." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The scent of his urine soaking into the expensive white rug told me everything I needed to know. The message was delivered.
Chapter 24. The Social Worker. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It was 9:58 a.m. I stood in the foyer, smoothing the fabric of my navy blue blouse. Mr. Blackwood had advised me to dress conservatively maternal. I wore slacks, sensible flats, and had pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I looked like a librarian. I felt like a fraud. "Breathe," Damien whispered. He was standing in the shadows of the living room doorway. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He wore a soft beige cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He looked approachable, domestic. It was a costume just like mine. Underneath the cashmere, I knew his muscles were coiled tight, ready to snap. "I can't breathe," I whispered back. "What if she asks to see the medicine bottles? We threw them all away." "Blackwood replaced them," Damien reminded me. "The medicine cabinet in Toby's bathroom is stocked with standard pediatric antibiotics. The labels are correct. The dates are correct." Ding dong! The doorbell cut through the air like a knife. I jumped. Damien stepped back, fading further into the house so I could answer it alone, as planned. I walked to the door. My hand trembled as I gripped the cold brass handle. "Use the anger," Damien had said. "Be the protective sister." I opened the door. Mrs. Gable stood there. She was exactly what I feared. She was a short, stout woman with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob. She wore a gray suit that looked stiff and uncomfortable. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Ms. Layla Evans?" she asked. Her voice was nasally and devoid of warmth. "Yes," I said, forcing a polite smile. "Please, come in." She stepped inside. Her eyes immediately darted around the foyer, taking in the marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the sheer size of the estate. Her lips pursed in disapproval. "This is quite a residence," she noted, scribbling something on her clipboard. "You are employed here?" "I am the private chef," I said, reciting the script. "My employer, Mr. Vargr, allows my brother and me to reside in the East Wing as part of my contract." "And where is the boy?" "He is in the garden with the housekeeper," I said. "I didn't want to frighten him with this." Mrs. Gable marched into the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her back straight as a rod. She placed a tape recorder on the coffee table. "I have a report here alleging serious medical misconduct," she began, looking at me over her rimless glasses. "It states that Tobias Evans was injected with an unlicensed experimental compound." "That is a lie," I said firmly. I sat opposite her, crossing my legs. "Toby had a severe respiratory infection. We saw a specialist, Dr. Aris. He prescribed a course of amoxicillin and a B12 booster shot for his immune system." Mrs. Gable raised an eyebrow. "B12? "Yes," I said, reaching for the file folder on the table. "Here are the records. Here is the prescription copy from the pharmacy. And here is the letter from Dr. Aris explaining the treatment plan." She took the folder. The room was silent as she read. I watched her eyes scan the fake papers. My pulse was thumping a frantic rhythm against my eardrums, but I kept my face blank. "Please believe it, please." "These look orderly," she admitted slowly, "but the complainant was very specific." "The complainant," I said, letting a sharp edge creep into my voice, "is Julian Vane. He is a business rival of my boss. He has been harassing Mr. Vargr for months. Now he is using my 7-year-old brother as a pawn in a corporate game." I leaned forward. I channeled every ounce of fear and rage I had felt over the last 24 hours. "My brother is sick, Mrs. Gable. I work 18 hours a day cooking for a billionaire just to afford his health care. Do you really think I would let someone inject him with poison? I would die for that boy." Mrs. Gable looked up. She saw the fire in my eyes. She saw the Luna's crescent necklace gleaming at my throat. She closed the folder. "I see," she said, her voice softening just a fraction. "It appears this may indeed be a vexatious report." She clicked off the tape recorder. "I will need to see the boy, briefly, just to confirm his physical well-being. Then I will close the file." I let out a breath I had been holding for an eternity. "Of course," I said. "Follow me." Chapter 25. The Missing Piece. Mrs. Gable left at 10:45 a.m., As her sedan drove away down the long driveway, the tension in the house snapped like a rubber band. I slumped against the heavy front door, sliding down until I hit the floor. I buried my face in my hands. We did it. We survived. You were magnificent. Damien was there. He reached down and pulled me to my feet effortlessly. His hands were warm on my arms. She believed us, I whispered, looking up at him. It's over. For now, Damien said, but he wasn't smiling. He let go of me and walked into the library. I followed him. The relief was starting to fade, replaced by the memory of Julian's threat. The last girl was torn apart. Damien poured himself a drink. It was early, but I didn't judge him. He stood by the window, staring out at the forest line. His shoulders were heavy. Damien? I asked. Julian, he was terrified of you last night, wasn't he? Yes, Damien said darkly. He wet himself. It was pathetic. Then why did he do it? I asked. Why was he so bold? He knew what you were. He knew you were a Lycan. Why did he think he could threaten your mate and get away with it? Damien didn't answer immediately. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Because of Sarah, he said finally. The name hung in the air. Sarah, the last girl. Who was she? I asked softly, stepping closer to him. She was a mistake, Damien said, turning to face me. His eyes were haunted. She was a human, like you. I met her 5 years ago. My wolf wanted her. I thought I could have a normal life. He took a jagged breath. I didn't mark her, he confessed. I didn't give her the necklace. I didn't claim her publicly. I thought if I kept her a secret, if I kept her away from the pack politics, she would be safer. What happened? Julian found out, Damien said. His grip on the glass tightened until I thought it would shatter. He didn't attack her. He just whispered in her ear. He told her what I was. He told her about the violence. He scared her. I felt a chill. That sounded exactly like Julian. She ran, Damien whispered. She was terrified of me. She packed a bag and tried to leave the city. But because she wasn't marked, because she wasn't wearing my claim, the rogue wolves in the outer territories didn't see a queen. They just saw prey. He looked at me, his eyes burning with ancient grief. They hunted her, Layla. By the time I found her, he stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. Julian was right. She was torn apart. My hand flew to the sapphire necklace at my throat. Suddenly, everything made sense. His possessiveness, the way he locked the doors, the way he forced the necklace on me before we even entered the gala. He wasn't trying to own me, he was trying to keep me from becoming Sarah. That is why Julian was bold, Damien said, his voice regaining its steel. He thought you were like her. He thought if he scared you enough, you would run. And if you ran, he wins. He walked over to me. He placed his hands on my face, tilting my head back so I had to look at him. I will not make that mistake again, he vowed fiercely. I claimed you in front of the world. Everyone knows you are mine, but you must promise me one thing. What? I breathed. Never run, he commanded. Be mad at me, yell at me, hate me if you have to, but never run from this house. As long as you are here, as long as you wear that necklace, you are untouchable. If you run, I cannot protect you. I looked at the pain in his eyes. I saw the monster he thought he was, and the man he was trying to be. I reached up and covered his hands with mine. I'm not Sarah, I said firmly. I'm not running, Damien. I told you, we fight. He closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against mine. For the first time, the tension truly left his body. We fight, he agreed. And then his phone rang. He pulled back, annoyed, and checked the screen. His expression shifted from relief to confusion. It's the gate security, he said. They say, there is a delivery truck. A delivery? I asked. Did we order more food? No, Damien said, his eyes narrowing. It's not a food truck. They say it's furniture. Chapter 26. The Trojan Horse. The delivery truck rumbled up the driveway. It wasn't a standard white van. It was a massive, charcoal gray transport vehicle with tinted windows and reinforced tires. It looked less like a furniture delivery and more like a mobile prison. Damien stood on the front steps, his body rigid. The relaxed, laughing man who had been hugging me in the kitchen 30 seconds ago was gone. In his place was the Alpha. "Get inside," Damien commanded, his voice low and sharp. "Take the boy, go to the West Wing, lock the door." "Damien?" I asked, gripping his arm. "What is that? Who is coming?" "The High Council," he whispered, staring at the silver insignia painted on the side of the truck. It was a wolf skull wreathed in thorns. "They aren't supposed to be here, not without a summon." The truck hissed to a halt. The back doors flew open. 6 men stepped out. They moved with a terrifying synchronization. They wore long, dark coats that brushed the gravel. They didn't look like security guards. They looked like executioners. "Go!" Damien roared, shoving me gently toward the door. I grabbed Toby, who was still holding a piece of cheese, and ran. "Is it bad guys?" Toby asked, his eyes wide. "No," I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Just boring business meetings. We have to be quiet." We ran up the stairs. I shoved us into Damien's office in the West Wing, the war room. I locked the heavy oak door and backed away, clutching Toby to my chest. Swipper poked his head out of Toby's pocket, hissing softly. Even the ferret sensed the danger. I moved to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. Below, the 6 men had formed a semicircle around Damien. They didn't bow. They didn't offer hands to shake. One of them, a man with hair as white as bone and a face carved from granite, stepped forward. He held a scroll, an actual parchment scroll. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I saw the body language. The white-haired man pointed a finger at Damien's chest. Damien slapped the hand away. The 6 men didn't flinch. They just stood there, exuding a cold, ancient menace. Suddenly, the white-haired man looked up. He looked straight at the window, straight at me. His eyes weren't brown or blue. They were a milky, pale violet. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. He tapped his nose. He can smell me. The office phone rang. I jumped, nearly dropping Toby. I snatched the receiver. "Hello?" "Layla." Damien's voice was tight, strained. "Do not come down. Stay in the room." "Who are they?" I whispered. "The elders," Damien said. "Julian didn't just call child services. He called the council. He reported me for breaking the veil. Lifting the truck, the scene at the gala. He claims I have exposed our species to humans." "But you didn't," I argued. "Nobody saw the truck except Toby." "It doesn't matter." Damien cut me off. "They are here to audit the pack, and they are here to inspect you." "Me?" "They want to see if the human is worth the risk," Damien said. "Listen to me closely. You are the Luna. Do not bow. Do not look down. You wear my mother's necklace. You outrank everyone but me. Do you understand?" "Yes," I breathed, though I felt like vomiting. "I'm sending Martha to get you," he said. "They are demanding dinner." The line went dead. Chapter 27. The Feast of Ash. The kitchen, usually my sanctuary, felt like a courtroom. Martha was shaking as she chopped vegetables. The other staff had vanished, too terrified to be on the same floor as the elders. "They don't eat cooked meat," Martha whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "They like it rare, very rare." I swallowed my nausea. "Then we give them rare." I was wearing my chef's whites again, but I kept the Luna necklace visible. Damien said it was my shield. Right now, it felt like a target. I prepared the meal with mechanical precision. Venison tartare, seared duck breast, still bloody in the center, roasted bone marrow. It was a feast fit for predators. "Service!" I announced, my voice trembling only slightly. Martha refused to go into the dining room. I had to do it. I loaded the heavy silver tray and pushed through the swinging doors. The dining room was silent. The long mahogany table was seated with the 6 elders. Damien sat at the head, looking like a prisoner in his own home. The air smelled of ozone, old dust, and wet fur. It was suffocating. I walked to the table, every pair of eyes locked onto me. "Dinner is served," I said, placing the platter of venison in the center. No one moved. No one picked up a fork. The white-haired elder, the leader, leaned forward. His name was Elder Thorn. He sniffed the air, ignoring the food. "It smells," Thorn said. His voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Of vanilla and fear." "It is venison," Damien said, his jaw clenched. "Eat, Thorn, or leave." Thorn turned his milky eyes to me. "So this is the pet." "I am not a pet," I said, channeling every ounce of courage I had. "I am the Luna of this house." Thorn laughed. It was a dry, wheezing sound. The other elders joined in, a chorus of mockery. "A human Luna," Thorn sneered, "wearing a necklace she cannot power, wearing a title she cannot defend." He reached out, fast as a snake, and grabbed my wrist. His skin was ice cold. "Damien," Thorn said, not looking away from me, "you have broken the first law. You have mated with cattle." "Let her go," Damien growled. His eyes flashed gold. He started to rise from his chair. "Sit down, boy," another elder barked. "Unless you wish to challenge the council, you know the penalty for a failed challenge." Damien froze. He looked at me, his eyes full of apology. He sat back down. Thorn released my wrist. He looked at the food I had spent hours preparing. He picked up a piece of the expensive venison tartare with his fingers. He crushed it, letting the raw meat drop onto the pristine tablecloth. "We do not eat food prepared by prey," Thorn stated. "It tastes of weakness." He stood up. "Take the girl away," Thorn commanded the guards standing by the door. "We have business to discuss with the Alpha, business regarding the disposal of his liabilities." "Disposal?" I gasped. Damien slammed his fist on the table. "She stays. She is my mate." "She is a liability," Thorn roared back, his voice shaking the chandelier. "Julian Vane has provided evidence. He hacked your estate's security feed. He has a video of you lifting a truck, photos of you snarling at the gala. The humans are close to finding us, Vargr, and it is all because you are playing house with this fragile thing." Thorn leaned over the table. "Fix this, Damien, or we will fix it for you. And our method of fixing involves a shallow grave in the woods." Damien moved faster than I could blink. He was suddenly in front of me, shoving the guards back with a snarl that shook the walls. "Go!" he roared at me, pointing to the hall. "Library, lock it, now!" I didn't wait. I ran. Chapter 28. The Ultimatum. I was locked in the library, again, but this time it didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a waiting room for an execution. I paced the floor, gripping the sharp edge of the sapphire crescent moon hanging around my neck. I could hear shouting from the dining room. It had been going on for an hour. Disposal. The word echoed in my mind. They wanted to kill me. They wanted to kill Toby. Because we knew. Because we were liabilities. The shouting stopped. A heavy silence fell over the house. 10 minutes later, the door handle turned. Damien walked in. He looked wrecked. His tie was gone, and the top buttons of his shirt had been ripped open as if he couldn't breathe. He looked like a man who had been screaming until his throat bled. He walked to the window and stared out into the darkness. "Damien?" I whispered. "What happened? Did they leave?" "They are staying in the guest wing," he said. His voice was hollow, dead. "They gave me a choice." "What choice?" He didn't turn around. He couldn't look at me. "Option 1, he listed robotically. "I fight them. I declare war on the council. If I do that, Every alpha in the country will descend on this estate. We will be besieged. You and Toby, you won't survive the first night. They will burn this house to the ground with us inside." My blood ran cold. "And option 2? He turned then. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like a man who was bleeding to death from the inside out. "Option 2, he rasped. "I abdicate. I step down as alpha. I surrender my territory, my company, and my assets to the council." You would lose everything?" I asked. "I would keep you," he said simply. "We would be exiles, rogues. We would have to run, forever, hunted by Julian, hunted by the council. No money for Toby's meds, no hospital access, just running." I sank onto the sofa. "Toby can't run, Damien. He needs treatments. Without Vargr Medical, without the money, he dies." "I know," Damien whispered. "So both options end with us dead," I said, tears streaming down my face. "There is no winning." "There is a third option," Damien said. The words seemed to physically hurt him. He gripped the back of a chair so hard the wood splintered. "What is it?" I asked, hope flaring in my chest. "Damien, tell me." He looked at me. For a second, I saw the alpha, the strong, confident protector. But then, a mask slid over his face, a mask of cold, unfeeling indifference. "The third option," he lied, "is that I realize I made a mistake." "What?" "I am an alpha," he said, his voice dropping to a cruel, flat tone. "I was lonely. I was hungry. You were convenient. But looking at you tonight, standing next to the elders, I realized how pathetic you look in this world." I flinched as if he had slapped me. "Damien, what are you saying?" "I am saying," he stepped closer, looming over me, "that a wolf cannot mate with a sheep. It was a fantasy, Layla, and I am bored of it." My heart shattered. I heard it break. "You're lying," I whispered. "You're doing this to save me. I know you are." "Am I?" Damien sneered. It was a perfect imitation of Julian's cruelty. "Or am I just saving myself? If I get rid of you, the council leaves. I keep my title. I keep my money. I keep my life." He reached out and grabbed the heavy chain. His fingers brushed my skin, and for a split second his hand trembled. But then he twisted his fist and yanked. Metal groaned and snapped under his supernatural strength. The Luna's crescent, my shield, my mark, was torn from my neck and dangled in his hand. "Pack your things," Damien said, turning his back on me. "Blackwood will escort you out in the morning." "Damien, please," I sobbed, reaching for him. "Don't touch me," he snarled. "I'm done playing human." He walked out and slammed the door. I stood there, the silence ringing in my ears, knowing that he had just ripped his own heart out to save mine. Chapter 29. The Procedure. The morning sun felt cold. It streamed through the windows of the guest room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it offered no warmth. I zipped up my suitcase. The sound was loud in the silence of the room. Zip! "Are we going on a vacation?" Toby asked. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, swinging his legs. He was hugging Swipper, who looked uncharacteristically subdued. "Sort of," I lied. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. "We're going on a trip. A fresh start." "But what about Shadowfang training?" Toby asked, frowning. "And what about Mr. Damien? He promised to show me the gym today." My heart gave a painful squeeze. "Mr. Damien is very busy, Toby. He has to work." The door opened. I flinched, expecting to see Damien's cold, sneering face again, expecting more cruelty, but it was Dr. Eris. The kind, silver-haired doctor walked in. He wasn't carrying his usual medical bag. He was carrying a small, silver case. He looked tired. His ancient eyes were filled with a profound sadness. "Ms. Evans," he said softly, "the car is waiting to take you to the station." "We're ready," I whispered. I picked up my suitcase and grabbed Swipper's travel carrier from the corner. Come on, Toby. Put him inside and lock the latch. We don't want him getting out. Wait, Dr. Eris said. He blocked the path gently. There is one final medical requirement for the boy's safety and yours. What do you mean? I asked, gripping the handle of my suitcase. The events of the last few days, Dr. Eris said, choosing his words carefully. The things you have seen, the council. If you leave here carrying those memories, you will never be safe. They will hunt you to ensure your silence. I froze. You want to kill us? No. Dr. Eris shook his head vigorously. I want to save you. Damien wants to save you. He opened a small, black tactical box. Inside lay 2 pneumatic injectors. They didn't look like needles. They looked like high-tech pens. This is a mestic suppressant, Eris explained. It does not erase the past. It simply fogs the edges. The wolves will become large dogs in your memory. The magic will become a fever dream. You will remember working here, but you will not remember what we are. I don't want to forget, I said, tears spilling over. I don't want to forget him. It is a kindness, Layla, Eris whispered. To remember a love you cannot have is a curse. To remember a war you cannot fight is a death sentence. He looked at Toby. Please, for the boy. I looked at my brother. If Toby went back to school talking about werewolves and truck-lifting alphas, the council would find him. The disposal team would come. I nodded, defeated. Okay. Eris moved to Toby first, adjusting the dosage on the device for a child's weight. Just a little pinch, young man. A vitamin booster to help you sleep. Hiss. He administered the suppressant. Toby blinked. That tickled. His eyes grew heavy almost instantly. I feel sleepy. He slumped back onto the pillows. He will wake up on the train, Eris promised. He turned to me. I sat on the chair. I looked at the door, hoping, praying that Damien would walk in, that he would stop this, that he would roar and fight and claim me again. But the door stayed closed. I'm sorry, Eris whispered. He pressed the device against my arm. Hiss. Cold liquid rushed through my veins. The room started to spin. The colors of the rug began to bleed together. My thoughts turned into smoke. Damien, I tried to say, but my tongue was heavy. As the darkness took me, I thought I heard the door open. I thought I smelled rain and pine needles. I thought I felt a rough hand brush the hair from my forehead and a voice whisper, broken and raw, I love you. Goodbye, my queen. But it was probably just a dream. Chapter 30, The Awakening, Part 1 Finale. Clack, 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 whoosh. The rhythm was steady, hypnotic. It vibrated through the floor and up into my seat. My eyes fluttered open. I was staring at a beige fabric seatback. A tray table was stowed in front of me. Outside the window, a landscape of green fields and blur was rushing by at 100 miles an hour. I sat up, gasping. My head throbbed. It felt like I had drunk a bottle of cheap wine the night before. Layla? I looked down. Toby was sleeping with his head in my lap. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, yawning. Are we there yet? Where? I asked. My voice was raspy. I looked around. We were on a train, a high-speed rail. The car was mostly empty, just a few businessmen typing on laptops 2 rows down. I looked at my lap. I was clutching a backpack. Panic. Where was I? What happened? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to access the files in my brain. I got a job, yes. Private chef, for a billionaire, yes. Vargr Holdings. I remembered the kitchen. It was beautiful. Copper pots. I remembered the boss, Mr. Vargr. He was intense. Mean? No, not mean, just demanding. He liked his steak rare. Why did we leave? The contract ended. That felt right, but also wrong. There was a fuzzy gray patch in my mind where the last few days should be. I remembered a party? A red dress? A man shouting? Did we get the money? Toby asked, pulling a bag of pretzels out of his pocket. Money? I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened my banking app. I stared at the screen. I blinked. I refreshed the page. Account balance, $5 million. Transaction label, severance package, Vargr Holdings. $5 million. My phone slipped from my hand and landed on the carpeted floor. We're rich! Toby cheered, oblivious to my shock. I can get the deluxe Lego set, and Swipper can get a gold cage. I looked at the ferret carrier on the floor. Swipper was asleep, curled in a ball. $5 million for 2 weeks of cooking? That didn't make sense. It felt like hush money or blood money. I felt a sudden sharp ache in my chest. It was a physical pain, like a bruise on my heart. My hand flew to my throat. My fingers brushed bare skin. I frowned. I felt like something was missing, something heavy and cool that used to rest right there against my collarbone. A necklace? Did I lose a necklace? I closed my eyes and tried to picture it. I saw a flash of blue, a crescent moon, and eyes. Golden, burning eyes staring at me with such intensity that I felt it in my toes. Run, a voice in my head whispered. Run and never look back. Layla? Toby tugged on my sleeve. You're crying. I touched my cheek. It was wet. I don't know why, I stammered, wiping the tears away. I think I'm just tired. It was a long job. I looked out the window. The mountains were fading into the distance, turning into purple shadows on the horizon. The estate, the forest, the man with the dark eyes, they were all behind me now. I had $5 million. My brother was healthy. We were free. So why did I feel like I had left my soul back in those woods? I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window. The reflection stared back at me. A girl with a hole in her memory and a broken heart she couldn't explain. I reached down to check on Swipper. He was awake now, scratching at his bedding. I opened the carrier door to give him water. Something shiny rolled out of his bedding and onto the train floor. I picked it up. It was a heavy platinum cufflink engraved with a wolf's head inside a crescent moon. A jolt of electricity shot through my fingers. A phantom memory of a deep voice saying, "Mine," echoed in my ears. I squeezed the cold metal tight in my fist. "Goodbye," I whispered to the blurring world outside. But as the train carried us into the unknown, I knew one thing. I wasn't just dreaming, and I was going to find out why. End of part 1.